We've been talking about budgeting methods, and we talked about using smartphone apps to track expenses and manage a budget. Now let's talk about just some basic methods for budgeting. And these are kind of more along the traditional route. So you could just use a checkbook and keep track of all of your expenses and your income in a checkbook. So that means that not only are you writing down every check that you write with the check number and the payee and the amount, but also any electronic transactions as well, and using that check register as a full inventory of all the income, all the expenses, or all the cash in and cash out of your bank account. And that could be a way of handling your budget. A second method would be, and so now when we're talking about budgeting methods, we're really talking about ways to track expenses. So another way to track expenses is just using a notebook or a spreadsheet. And oftentimes we'll do this when we're trying to figure out where our money goes. And so you take a notebook around with you, and anytime that you spend money, whether it's in cash or check or debit card or credit card, you write that down in a notebook, or you keep track of it somehow and you go back and you load it into a spreadsheet. And then that way you can then categorize those expenditures however makes sense to you. So it's a little bit more difficult in a checkbook, but in a notebook or a spreadsheet, you can keep columns for the different expense categories and see not only all of the individual transactions, but then you can see how much you spent in various categories that are important to you. Another way of managing your money, tracking expenses, managing your budget is called the envelope method. And this method is popular with people who try to use cash only for their expenses. And so what you do is you decide what those categories are of your major expenditures, or maybe just the categories where you're going to use only cash. And you decide how much you're going to spend in each category. You get that money out of the bank at the beginning of the month or even the beginning of the week, and you put the appropriate amount of money for each category in literally an envelope that's labeled for that category. So for example, if you say, I'm going to spend $100 a month on food, you get $100 out of the bank at the beginning of the month, and you put it in an envelope marked food. And you would do the same thing for any other category of expenses that you want to track that way. And the beauty of this method is that you really can't go over budget, because once the cash is gone, it's gone. And then psychologically, it has been found that people are less likely to overspend with cash than they are with checks or credit cards or debit cards, because with cash, there's kind of this psychological issue, or I don't know, maybe it's an attachment issue with actually handing over your hard-earned cash. Whereas if it's a check, or if it's a credit or debit card, you're not really feeling the cash kind of leaving your wallet in the same way that if you're using actual cash, because as long that old joke, as long as I have checks in my checkbook, I must still have money. Or if I'm swiping my credit card or my debit card, I'm not really keeping up with my expenses the way I am with cash. And so the envelope method is very effective for keeping people within a budget when they have trouble with overspending. And there are actually a couple of electronic systems that let you still use the envelope method, but be a little bit more automated. So there's one called Good Budget that is a digital envelope system. And then there's another digital envelope system called envelopes. So two different ways that you can use the envelope method. So those are our basic methods for tracking expenses. So now let's take another pause, and we will come back and finish up with these budgeting methods.